On March 15, 2021, maintenance worker Carlos Rodriguez was doing what he had done every morning for the past 12 years, checking the underground utility tunnels beneath Disneyland's Main Street, USA. But this morning would be different. This morning, Carlos would discover something that had been hidden behind a sealed steel door for exactly 20 years. Something that would finally answer the question that had haunted thousands of people. What really happened to the Martinez twins? The door shouldn't have been there. In his 12 years working in Disneyland's vast underground network known as the Utilidors, Carlos had mapped every corridor, every storage room, every maintenance access point. This door, marked only with a faded number 127B and secured with an industrial lock that looked decades old, had never appeared in any blueprint he'd seen. What Carlos found behind that door would expose one of the darkest secrets in Disney's corporate history, a secret that had cost 2 innocent children their lives and had been covered up by one of the most powerful entertainment companies in the world. This is the story of 7-year-old Isabella and Sofia Martinez, twin sisters who vanished without a trace during what should have been the most magical day of their young lives, and the 20-year conspiracy that kept the truth buried beneath the happiest place on Earth. The morning of June 23, 2001, started like any other summer Saturday at Disneyland. The California sun was already warm at 8 a.m. as families lined up outside the park gates, children clutching Mickey Mouse ears and parents consulting maps of attractions. The Martinez family had driven down from Sacramento specifically for this trip, a birthday celebration for the twins who had just turned 7 years old. Maria Martinez, 32 years old and an elementary school teacher, had saved for months to afford this vacation. Her husband Roberto, a construction foreman, had taken his first day off in 3 months. For Isabella and Sofia, identical twins with dark curls and matching gap-toothed smiles, it was their first visit to Disneyland. They had been talking about this trip for weeks, Maria would later tell investigators. Isabella wanted to meet Princess Belle, and Sofia was obsessed with the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. They had everything planned out, every attraction they wanted to see. The Martinez family entered Disneyland at 9:15 a.m., part of the typical Saturday crowd of approximately 65,000 visitors. Roberto carried a brand new camcorder, determined to document every moment of his daughter's magical day. Maria had a detailed itinerary written on a folded piece of paper, with fast pass times and restaurant reservations carefully planned. For the first 3 hours, everything went exactly as planned. The family rode Small World, met Mickey Mouse for photographs, and enjoyed churros while watching the Dapper Dan's barbershop quartet perform on Main Street. Roberto's camcorder captured it all. The twins' delighted squeals on Dumbo the Flying Elephant, their wide-eyed wonder during the Enchanted Tiki Room show, their sticky fingers and chocolate-covered faces after splitting a massive Mickey Mouse ice cream bar. The last confirmed sighting of Isabella and Sofia Martinez alive was captured on Roberto's camcorder at 12:47 p.m., according to the timestamp. The twins were standing in line for the haunted mansion, both wearing matching yellow sundresses that Maria had bought specifically for the trip. Isabella was holding a small stuffed tiger that Roberto had won for her at a carnival game, while Sofia clutched a Mickey Mouse balloon. "Just 5 more minutes, Mikas," Maria can be heard saying on the recording. "Then we'll go get lunch." But Isabella and Sofia Martinez would never make it to lunch. What happened next would become one of the most investigated missing persons cases in Orange County history, a case that would involve the FBI, multiple private investigators, and eventually congressional hearings about corporate responsibility and public safety. At 12:52 p.m., according to Disney's internal security logs, Maria Martinez approached cast member Jennifer Walsh at the exit of the haunted mansion, frantically asking if she had seen 2 little girls in yellow dresses. Maria explained that the twins had been right behind her and Roberto as they entered the attraction, but when the family exited the ride 5 minutes later, Isabella and Sophia were nowhere to be found. Jennifer Walsh, a 23-year-old college student working her summer job at Disney, immediately followed protocol and contacted Disney security. Within 10 minutes, cast members throughout the park had been alerted to watch for 2 7-year-old Hispanic girls in yellow sundresses. Disney's response was swift and appeared comprehensive. Security Chief David Hammond, a former Los Angeles Police Department detective, personally coordinated the search. Every attraction was stopped and searched. Every bathroom, restaurant, and gift shop was systematically examined. Cast members questioned hundreds of guests, showing them photographs of the twins that Roberto had taken earlier that morning. The park's extensive security camera system was immediately reviewed. Disney had invested millions in surveillance technology, with cameras covering virtually every public area of the park. But somehow, there was no footage of the twins after they entered the haunted mansion at 12:47 p.m. It was impossible, Hammond would later testify. Our cameras cover every square foot of guest areas, but it was like the girls simply vanished into thin air. By 2 p.m., the Orange County Sheriff's Department had been contacted. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 15 minutes, transforming the search from a Disney internal matter to a full law enforcement investigation. Detective Sarah Chen, a specialist in missing children cases, took charge of the operation. My first thought was abduction, Detective Chen would later explain. 7-year-old children don't just disappear in the middle of a crowded theme park. Someone had to have taken them. The investigation revealed disturbing gaps in Disney's security protocols. Despite having hundreds of security cameras throughout the park, there were several areas where coverage was incomplete or where camera angles created blind spots. The area around the Haunted Mansion's exit, where the twins were last seen, was one of these problematic zones. More concerning, Disney's policy for monitoring guests entering and leaving the park was far less sophisticated than their marketing suggested. While every ticket was electronically scanned, there was no system to prevent someone from leaving the park with children who had entered with different adults. Disney's security was designed to prevent theft and vandalism, not child abduction, Chen noted. There were dozens of ways someone could have gotten those children out of the park without being detected. The search expanded beyond Disneyland's boundaries by evening. Police dogs were brought in to track the twins' scent, but the trail went cold at the park's main entrance. Helicopter searches covered the surrounding area of Anaheim. Missing persons alerts were broadcast throughout Southern California, but perhaps most disturbing were the inconsistencies in witness testimony. Multiple guests reported seeing the twins in different areas of the park at different times after their official disappearance. A family from Texas claimed they saw 2 girls, matching the twins' description near the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at 1:30 p.m. A cast member reported seeing children in yellow dresses in Tomorrowland at 2:15 p.m. An elderly couple insisted they had seen the twins crying near the park entrance at 3:45 p.m. None of these sightings could be verified by security cameras or other evidence. Detective Chen began to suspect that either the witnesses were mistaken or something more sinister was happening. When you have multiple unverified sightings spread across a large area, it usually means someone is deliberately trying to confuse the investigation, she noted. The Martinez family's anguish was visible to everyone involved in the search. Maria had to be sedated by paramedics after collapsing near Sleeping Beauty Castle. Roberto spent the entire night walking through Disneyland's parking lots, calling his daughters names and showing their photographs to anyone who would look. Roberto didn't sleep for 5 days, Maria would later remember. He was convinced they were hiding somewhere in the park, that they had gotten scared and were waiting for us to find them. Disney's public response was carefully crafted. Company spokesperson Janet Morrison held a press conference at 6 p.m., expressing the company's concern for the missing children and emphasizing Disney's cooperation with law enforcement. She assured the public that Disney was doing everything possible to help find Isabella and Sophia. What Morrison didn't mention was that Disney's legal department had already been activated, and company executives were discussing how to minimize the potential damage to Disney's reputation and stock price. Internal Disney emails obtained years later through court proceedings revealed the company's primary concern was not the missing children, but the potential impact on what they called brand integrity and guest confidence. "We need to control the narrative," wrote Senior Vice President Michael Reynolds in an email sent at 7:23 p.m. on June 23rd. "This cannot become another corporate crisis. The Martinez situation needs to be resolved quickly and quietly." The search continued for 6 days, involving more than 200 law enforcement officers, dozens of Disney security personnel, and hundreds of volunteers. Every inch of Disneyland and Disney California Adventure was searched. Utility tunnels, storage areas, and employee-only sections were systematically examined. On June 29th, Detective Chen made the difficult decision to officially classify Isabella and Sophia Martinez as missing persons, expanding the investigation to include potential abduction scenarios beyond the park's boundaries. The case generated national media attention. CNN, ABC, and other major networks covered the story extensively. The twins' photographs appeared on missing children websites and milk cartons across the country. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created age progression images showing what the twins might look like as they grew older. But despite the massive publicity and extensive investigation, no credible leads developed. No witnesses came forward with reliable information. No physical evidence was found inside or outside the park. The official investigation concluded that Isabella and Sophia Martinez had most likely been abducted by an unknown person who had managed to remove them from Disneyland without being detected. The case remained open, but with no new leads, it gradually faded from public attention. For the Martinez family, however, the nightmare was just beginning. Maria suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for 3 months. Roberto lost his job after being unable to concentrate on work. The family moved 4 times in 2 years, unable to escape the constant reminders of their lost daughters. "We couldn't stay in Sacramento," Maria explained years later. "Every playground, every school, every little girl we saw reminded us of Isabella and Sophia. We tried to start over, but you can't start over when part of your heart is missing." The psychological toll on the surviving family members was devastating. Maria developed severe depression and anxiety, requiring medication and therapy that the family couldn't afford. Roberto began drinking heavily, leading to the eventual dissolution of their marriage in 2004. "We lost more than our daughters that day," Roberto would later say. "We lost our entire family, our future, everything we had built together." The twins' disappearance also had a profound impact on Disney's operations, though the company worked hard to minimize public awareness of the changes. Security protocols were quietly enhanced, with additional cameras installed and blind spots eliminated. Employee background checks were intensified and new procedures were implemented for monitoring guest movements. But Disney also launched what internal documents later revealed as Operation Reputation Shield, a comprehensive public relations campaign designed to distance the company from the Martinez case and restore confidence in park safety. The campaign included strategic media placements emphasizing Disney's cooperation with law enforcement, charitable donations to missing children organizations, and the subtle promotion of stories about Disney's security success in preventing other incidents. Disney treated the Martinez case as a marketing problem to be solved, not a human tragedy to be mourned, observed Dr. Patricia Williams, a media ethics professor who later studied Disney's response to the crisis. Private investigators hired by the Martinez family and other concerned parties uncovered troubling information about Disney's handling of the case. Several witnesses reported being pressured by Disney representatives not to speak to media or outside investigators. Some cast members claimed they had been threatened with termination if they discussed the case publicly. Most disturbing were allegations that Disney had withheld certain security camera footage from law enforcement. 3 different private investigators claimed that Disney's initial statements about camera coverage were false, and that additional footage existed that had not been provided to police. Disney consistently denied these allegations, maintaining that they had fully cooperated with all law enforcement requests and had provided every piece of available evidence. But documents obtained through later litigation revealed a different picture. Disney's internal communications showed that company executives were primarily concerned with limiting legal liability and protecting the company's reputation, not with finding the missing children. "The Martinez matter needs to be contained," wrote Disney General Counsel Patricia Hayes in an internal memo dated June 25, 2001. "We cannot allow this to become a precedent that encourages other frivolous claims against the company." The memo went on to outline legal strategies for minimizing Disney's potential financial exposure, including challenging the family's right to sue and arguing that Disney could not be held responsible for crimes committed by third parties on its property. For Detective Chen and other investigators, Disney's apparent lack of genuine cooperation became increasingly frustrating. "We needed Disney's full assistance to solve this case," Chen later explained, but it became clear that Disney's priorities were protecting themselves, not finding those children. The investigation revealed significant security vulnerabilities that Disney had been aware of but had not addressed. Internal security assessments from 1999 and 2000 had identified multiple ways that unauthorized individuals could access restricted areas of the park or remove items and people without detection. These vulnerabilities included inadequate monitoring of cast member entrances and exits, allowing unauthorized individuals to potentially gain access to employee areas. Insufficient camera coverage in transitional areas between attractions, creating opportunities for individuals to move undetected. Weak protocols for verifying the identity of adults leaving the park with children, making it possible for abductors to remove children without triggering security alerts. Incomplete background checks for certain categories of employees, particularly temporary and contracted workers who had access to restricted areas. None of these vulnerabilities had been fully addressed by the time of the twins' disappearance, despite Disney executives being aware of the potential security risks. The Martinez case also revealed troubling information about previous incidents at Disney parks that had not been widely publicized. Court documents uncovered reports of multiple child endangerment incidents, attempted abductions, and other security breaches that Disney had managed to keep largely out of public view. Disney has always been very effective at controlling information, explained investigative journalist Michael Torres, who spent 3 years researching the Martinez case. They have the resources and legal power to keep negative stories from gaining traction in the media. As the first anniversary of the twins' disappearance approached, the Martinez family organized a memorial service at a local Catholic church in Sacramento. More than 500 people attended, including many who had never met the family, but had been touched by the story. Maria Martinez spoke publicly for the first time since the disappearance, her voice breaking as she described her daughter's personalities and the impact of their loss. "Isabella was our little artist," Maria said. She loved to draw pictures of princesses and flowers. Sophia was our entertainer, always singing and dancing, always making people laugh. They would have been 8 years old next month. We should be planning birthday parties, not memorial services. The memorial service generated renewed media attention and briefly reinvigorated the investigation. Several new witnesses came forward with information, though none of the leads proved substantial. Detective Chen, who had been promoted and transferred to other cases, continued to work on the Martinez investigation in her spare time. "Some cases you can close and move on," she explained, "but the Martinez twins stayed with me. I felt like I owed it to that family to never give up." Chen's unofficial investigation uncovered additional concerning information about Disney's corporate culture and decision-making processes. She discovered that several Disney executives had received bonuses in 2001 based partly on their success in managing crisis situations and protecting brand integrity during challenging periods. It was clear that Disney executives were being rewarded for covering up problems, not for solving them, Chen noted. The psychological impact of the case extended beyond the Martinez family to other families who visited Disney parks. Parents became more vigilant about monitoring their children, and many families changed their vacation plans to avoid Disneyland altogether. Disney's attendance figures showed a measurable decline in family visits during the year following the twins' disappearance, though the company attributed this to general economic factors rather than safety concerns. As years passed without resolution, the Martinez case became a symbol for advocates of missing children and critics of corporate accountability. The case was featured in documentaries, academic studies, and training materials for law enforcement agencies. But for Maria and Roberto Martinez, the passage of time brought no peace. Their marriage ended in divorce, their financial situation deteriorated, and their mental health continued to suffer. "People would tell us that time heals all wounds," Roberto reflected years later, "but time doesn't heal anything when you don't know what happened to your children. Every day we wondered if they were alive somewhere, if they needed us, if they were calling for us." The twins would have graduated from high school in 2012, started college in 2013, and by 2021 would have been 27 years old, possibly with careers and families of their own. Instead, Isabella and Sofia Martinez existed only in faded photographs, a few hours of camcorder footage, and the heartbroken memories of their parents. For 20 years, their disappearance remained one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in California history. The official investigation had gone cold, the media had moved on to other stories, and Disney had successfully distanced itself from the tragedy. But secrets have a way of eventually surfacing, even when they're buried beneath the most magical place on Earth. On the morning of March 15, 2021, Carlos Rodriguez discovered that sealed door in the utilidors beneath Main Street, USA. What he found behind that door would finally answer the questions that had haunted so many people for 2 decades. The truth about Isabella and Sofia Martinez had been waiting in the darkness for exactly 20 years, and it was about to emerge into the light. Carlos Rodriguez stared at the heavy steel door for a full minute before deciding to call his supervisor. In 12 years, working in Disneyland's underground utilidors, he had never encountered a sealed room that wasn't on any official blueprint. The industrial lock was old but solid, and the door itself appeared to have been welded shut around the edges decades ago. "Hey, Mike," Carlos said into his radio. "I need you down here in Section C. I found something weird." Mike Harrison, the utilidor's maintenance supervisor, arrived 20 minutes later. A 28-year veteran of Disney operations, Mike had seen every inch of the underground network. But he had never seen door 127B either. "That's not supposed to be there," Mike said, running his hands along the welded edges. "According to the 1955 blueprints and every update since, this should be solid wall." The two men spent the next hour researching. They pulled construction records, architectural plans, and maintenance logs going back to the park's opening. Door 127B appeared in none of them. According to every official document, the space behind that door simply didn't exist. But the door was real, and something was behind it. "We need to call this up the chain," Mike finally decided. "This is way above our pay grade." Within 4 hours, a team of Disney executives, security personnel, and facilities managers had assembled in the utilidors. Leading the group was Jennifer Walsh, now Disney's Senior Vice President of Guest Safety and Risk Management. 20 years earlier, she had been the cast member who first heard Maria Martinez's frantic report about her missing daughters. Jennifer had spent 2 decades climbing Disney's corporate ladder, but the Martinez case had never left her mind. She had been haunted by the memory of that terrified mother and the feeling that something important had been overlooked in the investigation. "Cut it open," Jennifer ordered, after examining the door and confirming that it appeared on no official records. The facilities team used industrial cutting torches to carefully remove the welded edges and the massive lock. As the door finally swung open, a musty smell of stale air and decay wafted out from the darkness beyond. What they found inside would change everything. The room was approximately 12 feet by 15 feet, with concrete walls and a single fluorescent light fixture that had long since burned out. But it wasn't empty. Along one wall sat 2 small wooden chairs, sized for children. On a metal table in the center of the room were scattered items that made Jennifer's blood run cold. 2 yellow sundresses, now faded and dusty, a small stuffed Tigger toy, and a deflated Mickey Mouse balloon. But most disturbing were the documents. Hundreds of pages of papers, photographs, and files were stacked in boxes along the walls, and painted on the far wall in what appeared to be child's handwriting were 2 names: Isabella and Sophia. Jennifer immediately ordered the room sealed and contacted FBI agent Rachel Morrison, who had recently been assigned to review cold cases involving major corporations. The Martinez case had been on her list of files to examine. Agent Morrison arrived at Disneyland within 2 hours, accompanied by a team of federal investigators and forensic specialists. What they uncovered in room 127B would expose one of the most shocking corporate cover-ups in American history. The documents in the room told a horrifying story. They revealed that Disney executives had known within hours exactly what had happened to Isabella and Sophia Martinez, but had made a calculated decision to hide the truth to protect the company's reputation and financial interests. The first document Morrison examined was a security report dated June 23, 2001 at 3:17 p.m. It was written by Disney security chief David Hammond and marked "Confidential, Executive Eyes Only." The report read, "Subjects located in Utilidor, Section D at 1500 hours. Situation contained. Implementing Protocol 7 immediately. Legal and PR teams have been notified. Recommend full media blackout and law enforcement cooperation limitation." Protocol 7, according to other documents found in the room, was Disney's internal code for managing incidents that posed extreme reputational risk to the company. The protocol authorized executives to take extraordinary measures to prevent negative publicity, including withholding information from law enforcement and manipulating evidence. Additional documents revealed the horrifying truth about what had actually happened to Isabella and Sophia Martinez on June 23, 2001. The twins hadn't been abducted by a stranger. They had fallen through a maintenance grate near the haunted mansion that had been improperly secured after routine cleaning. The grate, which provided access to the utilidors below, had been left partially open by maintenance worker Thomas Chen, who had forgotten to properly secure it after completing his assigned tasks. Isabella and Sophia had wandered away from their parents during the crowded exit from the Haunted Mansion attraction. Curious about what appeared to be a hidden opening in the ground, they had tried to look inside. The grate had given way under their combined weight, sending both girls falling 12 feet into the concrete utilidors below. The twins had survived the initial fall, but both had suffered serious injuries. Security camera footage from the utilidors, found among the hidden documents, showed Isabella with a severe head wound and Sophia with what appeared to be a broken arm and possible internal injuries. Disney security had found the girls within 90 minutes of their disappearance, but by then both children were unconscious and in critical condition. Instead of immediately calling paramedics and notifying the family, Disney executives made a decision that would haunt the company for decades. They decided to cover it up. The reasoning, according to internal memos found in the room, was purely financial. Disney executives calculated that admitting to a safety failure that had critically injured two children could result in massive lawsuits that could cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. Federal safety investigations that could shut down park operations for months, congressional hearings that could lead to new regulations affecting the entire theme park industry, permanent damage to Disney's family-friendly brand that could reduce attendance and stock value for years. A leaked internal email from Disney CEO Michael Eisner's office, dated June 23rd at 4:45 p.m., laid out the company's priorities with shocking clarity. The Martinez situation poses an existential threat to Disney's market position and brand integrity. All necessary measures must be taken to prevent this incident from becoming public knowledge. The cover-up that followed was methodical and ruthless. Disney's first step was to move the injured girls to a secret medical facility that the company maintained within the utilidors for treating employee injuries without generating public records. The facility was staffed by a doctor and two nurses who were Disney employees, not independent medical professionals. Dr. Richard Hayes, the Disney-employed physician, was instructed to treat the girls' injuries while maintaining absolute secrecy. According to his own notes found in the room, Dr. Hayes protested that the children needed immediate emergency hospital care. Both subjects require immediate trauma surgery and intensive care monitoring. Dr. Hayes wrote in a memo to Disney executives, "I do not have the equipment or resources to provide adequate treatment in this facility. These children will die without proper medical intervention." Disney's response was to offer Dr. Hayes a substantial financial incentive to continue treating the girls in secret while they developed a long-term solution to the situation. The documents revealed that Isabella Martinez died at 11:47 p.m. on June 24th, approximately 35 hours after the accident. The cause of death was listed in Dr. Hayes's private notes as subdural hematoma and brain swelling due to traumatic head injury. Sophia Martinez survived for 6 more days, dying at 2:33 a.m. on June 30th from complications related to internal bleeding and infection. Both deaths were entirely preventable. If the girls had received immediate emergency medical care at a proper hospital, both would almost certainly have survived with full recoveries. Instead, they died alone in a secret Disney facility, calling for their parents who were desperately searching for them just a few hundred feet above. The cover-up became even more elaborate after the girls' deaths. Disney executives decided that the bodies needed to be disposed of in a way that would never allow them to be discovered and connected to the company. According to the documents, Disney arranged for the girls' bodies to be cremated at a private facility in Nevada, with the ashes scattered in a remote desert location. The cremation was performed under false names, with forged death certificates listing the cause of death as accidental drowning and the location as Private Residence, Nevada. Disney then launched an extensive disinformation campaign designed to convince law enforcement and the public that the girls had been abducted from the park by an unknown perpetrator. Fake witnesses were coached to provide false testimony about seeing the girls in various locations at different times. Disney employees were instructed to report suspicious individuals near the park to create the impression that potential abductors had been in the area. Most shocking of all, Disney security footage that showed the girls' actual disappearance into the utilidors was deliberately destroyed, while other footage was edited to remove any evidence of the maintenance grate that had caused their deaths. The maintenance worker who had left the grate unsecured, Thomas Chen, was quietly transferred to Disney's Florida operations and given a substantial financial settlement in exchange for signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. He was never interviewed by law enforcement investigating the girls' disappearance. The secret room where Agent Morrison made these discoveries had been created specifically to hide the evidence of Disney's cover-up. All documents, physical evidence, and materials related to the Martinez case had been sealed in the room immediately after the cover-up was completed. The room had been welded shut and removed from all official blueprints to ensure it would never be accidentally discovered. The plan was for the evidence to remain hidden permanently, or until everyone involved in the cover-up had died and the statute of limitations for any potential crimes had expired. But Disney executives hadn't anticipated that structural renovations 20 years later would expose their secret. As FBI forensic teams continued examining the evidence in the sealed room, the full scope of Disney's deception became clear. The company had spent millions of dollars and involved dozens of employees in the cover-up, all to avoid taking responsibility for a preventable accident. The forensic evidence found in the room conclusively proved that Isabella and Sofia Martinez had never left Disneyland alive. Their deaths had occurred within the park, under Disney's direct control, and had been covered up for 20 years. Agent Morrison immediately contacted Maria Martinez, now 52 years old and living quietly in Oregon where she worked as a librarian. The phone call that Morrison dreaded making would finally give Maria the answers she had been seeking for 2 decades. But those answers would be far more horrifying than anything she had imagined. "Mrs. Martinez," Morrison said gently, "we've found new evidence about Isabella and Sofia. I need to meet with you in person to discuss what we've discovered." Maria Martinez had spent 20 years wondering if her daughters were alive somewhere, possibly living with adoptive families, possibly still hoping their real parents would find them. The truth that Morrison was about to reveal would be far worse than any scenario Maria had imagined. Roberto Martinez, now living in Texas and remarried, received a similar call. Both parents had built new lives around the permanent hole left by their daughter's disappearance, but neither had ever stopped hoping for answers. The evidence found in the sealed room also implicated multiple Disney executives in serious federal crimes. The cover-up had involved mail fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and potentially murder charges related to the deliberate withholding of medical care from injured children. Disney's current executives, none of whom had been with the company in 2001, were faced with the most serious crisis in the company's history. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. There was no way to spin or minimize what had been discovered. Walt Disney Company stock plummeted 23% in after-hours trading when news of the discovery leaked to financial media. The company faced potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits worth billions of dollars, and permanent damage to the brand that had been built over nearly a century. But for Agent Morrison and the FBI team investigating the case, the priority was justice for Isabella and Sofia Martinez, and accountability for the executives who had orchestrated the cover-up. The evidence found in room 127B was so comprehensive and damning that it would inevitably lead to criminal charges against multiple individuals and potentially the company itself. Disney's executives had thought they could bury the truth about the Martinez twins forever. But after 20 years, that truth was finally coming to light, and it would prove more devastating than anything they had tried to prevent. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that the Martinez case would become one of the most significant corporate crime stories in American history. Isabella and Sofia Martinez had been dead for 20 years, but their story was finally going to be told, and justice was finally going to be served. The sealed room had kept Disney's secret for 2 decades, but secrets this dark can never stay buried forever. As Agent Morrison carefully catalogued each piece of evidence found behind door 127B, she reflected on the horrific reality that 2 innocent children had died not from an accident, but from a deliberate corporate decision to prioritize profits over human lives. The most damning evidence was yet to be fully analyzed, but preliminary examination suggested that Disney's cover-up had been even more extensive than initially apparent. Security footage that had supposedly been lost was found stored on backup drives. Employee testimony that had been suppressed was documented in detailed internal reports. Financial records showed exactly how much money Disney had spent on the cover-up and how much they had calculated they were saving by avoiding responsibility. Perhaps most disturbing were the personal effects found in the room. The twins' clothing, their toys, and small personal items that should have been returned to their grieving parents 20 years earlier. These items had been kept as trophies of Disney's successful cover-up, physical reminders of how the company had managed to make 2 children disappear without leaving any trace. But now they would serve as evidence in what would likely become the most significant corporate prosecution in decades. The Martinez twins were finally going home, and Disney was finally going to answer for what. Maria Martinez sat in the FBI field office in Los Angeles, staring at photographs of her daughter's yellow sundresses spread across the conference table. After 20 years of uncertainty, she finally knew the truth about Isabella and Sofia, but the truth was more horrifying than any nightmare she had ever imagined. "They were alive," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "For days, they were alive and calling for us, and we were right there. We were looking for them, and they were right underneath us, dying." Agent Rachel Morrison watched Maria process the devastating revelation with a mixture of professional composure and personal anguish. In 15 years with the FBI, Morrison had delivered terrible news to countless families, but the Martinez case was uniquely heartbreaking. These parents had spent 2 decades tormented by uncertainty, only to learn that their daughters' deaths had been entirely preventable and deliberately covered up. Roberto Martinez, now 54 and remarried, had flown in from Texas for the meeting. The years had changed him significantly. His hair was gray, his face lined with the weight of unresolved grief, but his eyes still held the same desperate hope they had 20 years earlier. "What happens now?" Roberto asked. "What happens to the people who did this to our babies?" Morrison's answer would set in motion the largest corporate criminal investigation in entertainment industry history. "We're going to prosecute everyone involved," Morrison said firmly. "Disney executives, the employees who participated in the cover-up, the medical staff who withheld proper care from your daughters. Everyone who played a role in their deaths and the conspiracy that followed will be held accountable." The federal investigation that followed would ultimately involve more than 200 FBI agents, federal prosecutors from 3 different districts, and cooperation from international law enforcement agencies. The scope of Disney's cover-up had been so extensive that evidence trails led across multiple states and involved dozens of co-conspirators. The first arrests came exactly 1 week after the discovery of room 127B. Dr. Richard Hayes, now 73 years old and living in retirement in Florida, was arrested at his home on charges of negligent homicide, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. The elderly physician, who had been forced to treat the dying girls in Disney's secret medical facility, had spent 20 years consumed with guilt over his role in their deaths. "I knew those children were going to die without proper hospital care," Dr. Hayes told federal investigators during his confession. "I begged Disney executives to let me call paramedics to transfer them to Children's Hospital. They threatened to destroy my career and sue me for breach of contract if I contacted anyone outside the company." Dr. Hayes provided critical testimony about the final days of Isabella and Sophia's lives, testimony that would prove essential in establishing the criminal case against Disney executives. "Isabella kept asking for her mama," Dr. Hayes recalled, tears streaming down his face. "She was in so much pain, and she just wanted her parents. Sophia was braver, trying to comfort her sister even though she was dying too. They were just babies, and they died because Disney cared more about money than human lives." Thomas Chen, the maintenance worker whose negligence had caused the initial accident, was located in Orlando, where he had worked for Disney World for the past 20 years. Now 58 years old, Chen had lived with the secret of his role in the twins' deaths, bound by the non-disclosure agreement he had signed. When FBI agents approached him, Chen immediately broke down and confessed his role in the cover-up. "I left that grate unsecured after cleaning the utilidors," Chen admitted. "It was my fault they fell. But when Disney executives found out what happened, they told me that if I ever spoke about it to anyone, they would not only fire me, but make sure I could never work anywhere again. They gave me money and transferred me to Florida, and I kept quiet because I was scared." Chen's testimony provided crucial evidence about Disney's systematic intimidation of employees and the company's deliberate destruction of evidence related to the accident. But the most significant arrests targeted the Disney executives who had orchestrated the cover-up. David Hammond, the former Disney security chief who had written the initial cover-up memo, was arrested at his home in Malibu on charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Now 68 years old, Hammond had retired from Disney in 2010 with a substantial pension and had been living comfortably in Southern California. Hammond's arrest sent shockwaves through Disney's current executive team and throughout the entertainment industry. If a retired security chief could be charged with murder for his role in covering up the twins' deaths, no one involved in the conspiracy was safe from prosecution. The most dramatic arrest came when federal agents took Michael Reynolds, Disney's former senior vice president, into custody at Los Angeles International Airport as he attempted to board a flight to Switzerland. Reynolds, who had written several of the most damning internal emails found in room 127B, had apparently decided to flee the country when he learned about the federal investigation. Reynolds clearly knew that his direct involvement in the cover-up made him criminally liable, explained federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh, who had been assigned to lead the government's case. His attempt to flee to a non-extradition country shows consciousness of guilt and the seriousness of the crimes he committed. The evidence against Reynolds was overwhelming. His own emails explicitly laid out Disney's strategy for covering up the twins' deaths and his personal role in coordinating the various elements of the conspiracy. In one particularly damning email dated June 25, 2001, Reynolds had written, "The Martinez situation is now fully contained. Medical records have been sealed, physical evidence has been secured, and all personnel involved have signed enhanced NDAs. The narrative of external abduction is being successfully established with law enforcement cooperation." As more arrests followed, Disney's current leadership faced an unprecedented crisis. CEO Bob Chapek held an emergency board meeting to address the company's response to what media outlets were calling the Martinez cover-up scandal. The Disney board faced an impossible situation. The evidence of the company's guilt was undeniable, but fully accepting responsibility would likely result in criminal charges against the corporation itself and financial damages that could bankrupt one of America's most iconic companies. Disney's initial response was to express shock and horror at the revelations and to claim that current leadership had no knowledge of the historical cover-up. The company hired the most expensive crisis management firm in the country and assembled a legal team that included some of the nation's most prominent criminal defense attorneys. But the public reaction was swift and devastating. Within 48 hours of the arrests, justice for Isabella and Sophia was trending worldwide on social media. Millions of people shared photos of the twins and demanded accountability from Disney. Families began sharing their own stories of safety incidents at Disney parks that had been downplayed or covered up by company officials. Disney's stock price fell 45% in 3 days, wiping out more than $100 billion in market value. Theme park attendance dropped immediately as families cancelled vacation plans and chose alternative destinations. Disney's carefully cultivated image as a family-friendly company was in ruins. The political response was equally damaging. Congressional leaders from both parties called for immediate hearings into Disney's safety practices and corporate culture. Several states announced investigations into Disney's operations within their jurisdictions. Senator Elizabeth Warren introduced legislation that would hold corporate executives personally liable for cover-ups involving public safety, legislation that quickly became known as the Martinez Act. No corporation should be able to let children die and then spend millions of dollars covering it up, Warren declared during a Senate speech. Isabella and Sophia Martinez died because Disney executives decided that corporate profits were more important than human lives. That can never happen again. But perhaps the most powerful response came from Maria and Roberto Martinez themselves. At a press conference held outside the federal courthouse in Los Angeles, Maria Martinez spoke publicly about her daughters for the first time since their memorial service 20 years earlier. Isabella and Sophia were not just statistics or public relations problems, Maria said, holding childhood photos of the twins. They were little girls who loved life, who trusted adults to keep them safe, who died in terror and pain while their parents searched desperately for them just a few feet away. Maria's composure as she described her daughters' personalities and the family's 20-year ordeal was remarkable, but her pain was visible to everyone watching. Disney stole our daughters' lives, and then they stole 20 years of our lives by lying to us about what happened, she continued. We could have grieved properly, we could have buried our babies, we could have found some peace. Instead, we lived in limbo, always wondering, always hoping, always suffering. Roberto Martinez spoke about the impact the cover-up had on their marriage and family. The not knowing destroyed everything, Roberto said. Maria and I couldn't comfort each other because we didn't know what we were grieving. Were the girls dead? Were they being held somewhere? Were they waiting for us to rescue them? The uncertainty was torture, and Disney knew that. But they didn't care. The Martinez family announced that they were filing a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $2 billion in damages from Disney, representing not only compensation for their daughters' deaths, but punitive damages for the 2 decades of emotional torture caused by the cover-up. The lawsuit, filed by prominent civil rights attorney Gloria Allred, accused Disney of multiple criminal and civil violations. Negligent homicide in the deaths of Isabella and Sophia Martinez, conspiracy to obstruct justice through the systematic cover-up of evidence, fraud and misrepresentation in their statements to law enforcement and the public, intentional infliction of emotional distress through the deliberate prolonging of the family's uncertainty, violation of civil rights through the deprivation of the twins' right to life and medical care, corporate racketeering through the use of company resources to commit multiple crimes. The lawsuit detailed the specific ways Disney's actions had violated federal and state laws, building a comprehensive case for both criminal prosecution and civil liability. Disney's legal strategy was to argue that current management could not be held responsible for decisions made by previous executives decades earlier. The company offered a settlement of $50 million to the Martinez family, along with a public apology and commitment to improved safety procedures. The Martinez family rejected the settlement offer immediately. "No amount of money can bring back Isabella and Sofia," Maria Martinez said through her attorney. "But Disney needs to face full accountability for what they did. They need to admit that they murdered our daughters and then spent 20 years lying about it." The federal criminal trial began 18 months after the discovery of Room 127B in a Los Angeles courtroom packed with media representatives from around the world. The case had become an international symbol of corporate accountability and the importance of protecting children from institutional negligence. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. FBI agent Morrison testified about the evidence found in the sealed room, presenting photographs, documents, and video footage that conclusively proved Disney's guilt. Dr. Hayes, who had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence, provided heartbreaking testimony about the twins' final days. "Isabella died first," Dr. Hayes testified, his voice barely audible. "She had been asking for her parents constantly, and in her final moments she kept saying, 'Mama, Mama.' Sofia held her sister's hand as she died. Then Sofia looked at me and asked if Isabella was going to heaven. I told her yes, and she said she wanted to go be with her sister." The courtroom was silent as Dr. Hayes described Sofia's death 6 days later. "Sofia was stronger physically, but the internal injuries were too severe for me to treat properly. She developed a severe infection, and without proper hospital facilities, there was nothing I could do. She died calling for her parents, just like her sister." Thomas Chen testified about the accident that had started the tragedy and Disney's immediate response. "Within 2 hours of finding the girls, Disney executives had already decided to cover it up," Chen testified. "They didn't even try to save them first. Their first concern was protecting the company, not helping 2 dying children." The defense attorneys attempted to argue that the cover-up, while morally wrong, did not constitute murder because the girls had already been fatally injured in the accident. They claimed that Disney executives had made poor decisions under pressure, but had not intended to cause harm. The prosecution's response was swift and convincing. Disney executives made a calculated decision to let these children die rather than face responsibility for a preventable accident, prosecutor Jennifer Walsh argued. They had multiple opportunities to save Isabella and Sofia's lives, but chose corporate profits over human lives at every turn. That is not a mistake, that is murder. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against all defendants. David Hammond was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for his role in orchestrating the cover-up. Michael Reynolds received a 30-year sentence for his leadership role in the conspiracy and his attempt to flee prosecution. Dr. Hayes, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received a 10-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Thomas Chen received a suspended sentence and community service in recognition of his cooperation and the pressure he had faced from Disney executives. But the most significant outcome was the federal judge's ruling that the Walt Disney Company itself was criminally liable for the deaths of Isabella and Sofia Martinez. This corporation made institutional decisions that directly resulted in the deaths of 2 innocent children, Judge Patricia Williams declared during sentencing. The evidence shows a pattern of prioritizing profits over human lives that rises to the level of corporate murder. Disney was fined $2.5 billion, the largest corporate criminal fine in American history. The company was also placed under federal oversight, with court-appointed monitors overseeing all safety operations at Disney properties for the next 10 years. The civil lawsuit resulted in an additional $1.8 billion judgment against Disney, money that the Martinez family announced would be used to establish a foundation dedicated to child safety and corporate accountability. The Maria and Roberto Martinez Foundation for Child Safety would become one of the most influential advocacy organizations in America, working to prevent other families from experiencing the trauma that the Martinez family had endured. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was the change in corporate culture throughout the entertainment industry. The Martinez case established legal precedent, holding corporate executives personally liable for cover-ups involving public safety. The Martinez Doctrine became standard practice in corporate law, requiring companies to immediately disclose safety incidents and prohibiting the types of cover-ups that Disney had orchestrated. Theme parks throughout America implemented new safety protocols, with independent oversight and mandatory reporting of all accidents and incidents. The cozy relationship between entertainment companies and local law enforcement that had enabled Disney's cover-up was permanently changed. For Disneyland itself, the impact was transformative. The park was closed for 6 months, while federal investigators conducted a comprehensive safety review. When it reopened, it operated under strict federal oversight, with new safety protocols and complete transparency about all incidents. A memorial garden was established at Disneyland in honor of Isabella and Sofia Martinez, with their photographs and a plaque describing their story and the importance of corporate accountability. The garden became a pilgrimage site for families and a permanent reminder of the cost of putting profits before human lives. Maria Martinez, now in her 50s, found a sense of purpose in her advocacy work that had been missing from her life since her daughter's deaths. Isabella and Sofia can't be brought back, Maria reflected during an interview 5 years after the discovery of room 127B. But their story can prevent other children from suffering the same fate. If their deaths result in safer conditions for other families, then maybe some meaning can come from this tragedy. Roberto Martinez, who had remarried and had 2 more children with his second wife, struggled more with finding peace. "I love my other children deeply," Roberto said, "but there's always been a part of me that remained in that underground tunnel with Isabella and Sofia, knowing they died calling for me, knowing I was so close but couldn't help them. That's something I'll carry for the rest of my life." The broader impact of the Martinez case extended far beyond Disney and the entertainment industry. The case became a landmark in corporate accountability law and a symbol of the importance of putting human lives before corporate profits. Law schools across America added the Martinez case to their curriculum as an example of corporate criminal liability. Business schools used it as a case study in ethical decision-making and crisis management. The case also inspired changes in how missing children cases are investigated, with new protocols requiring complete transparency from businesses and institutions where children disappear. For the surviving Disney employees who had been aware of the cover-up but had remained silent for 20 years, the revelation brought a mixture of relief and guilt. Jennifer Walsh, who had risen through the corporate ranks despite her knowledge of the twins' fate, resigned from her executive position and cooperated fully with federal investigators. "I've lived with the guilt of knowing what happened to those children for 20 years, Walsh said during her testimony. "I was young and scared, and I convinced myself that speaking out wouldn't bring them back and would only destroy my career. But I was wrong. Isabella and Sofia deserved better from all of us." The discovery of room 127B had been accidental, but its impact was profound and lasting. 2 little girls who had been forgotten by the corporation that killed them became symbols of the importance of truth accountability, and justice. The case established that no corporation, no matter how powerful or beloved, is above the law when it comes to protecting human life. It proved that secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, will eventually come to light. And it ensured that Isabella and Sofia Martinez, who had lived only 7 years, but whose deaths had been covered up for 20, would be remembered not as victims, but as catalysts for change that would protect countless other children. Their names were no longer painted on the wall of a secret room hidden beneath Disneyland. Instead, they were inscribed in federal law, corporate policy, and the permanent memory of a nation that had learned the true cost of putting profits before human lives. The Martinez twins had finally come home, and their legacy would endure forever.